November 14, 1940, Winston Churchill faced the most brutal decision of his career. His intelligence officers had just confirmed that the Luftwaffe was about to unleash the largest bombing raid in history on Coventry. Over 500 German bombers were prepared. The target was confirmed. The timing was known. Churchill had the power to evacuate the city and save thousands of lives. But Britain's codebreakers at Bletchley Park were listening. Their ultra-secret, the breaking of Germany's Enigma code, had given Churchill this foreknowledge. And that secret was more valuable than any single city. Churchill wasn't just looking at casualty projections. He was carrying the weight of an intelligence advantage that could win or lose the war. He sat between the moral duty to protect British civilians and the strategic necessity to protect Britain's greatest weapon. This wasn't just a decision about one city. This was a test of whether Churchill could sacrifice his own people to preserve the secret that might save millions. Churchill couldn't evacuate Coventry without revealing Britain had broken Enigma. He couldn't ignore the intelligence without abandoning civilians to certain death. He needed a response that wouldn't expose Ultra, but might limit the catastrophe. The bombers were already warming their engines. Churchill gave his answer. September 1939. British cryptanalysts at the Government Code and Cipher School had struggled with German military communications for years. The Enigma machine, a seemingly unbreakable encryption device, frustrated every attempt at penetration. Each Enigma had 158 million possible settings. The Germans changed settings daily. Then Polish mathematicians who had secretly studied Enigma since 1932 gave Britain their breakthrough. Marian Rejewski discovered mathematical patterns in Enigma's rotors. The Poles gave Britain the foundation. British mathematicians would build the weapon. By mid-1940, the team at Bletchley Park, led by Alan Turing and colleagues, developed the Bombay, an electromechanical device testing thousands of Enigma settings per hour. In May 1940, they achieved their first breaks into Luftwaffe communications. By September, they were reading German Air Force traffic regularly. Ultra, the code name for Enigma intelligence, became Britain's most guarded secret. Churchill received daily summaries in red boxes marked with the highest security classification. The protocols were absolute. Ultra could only be acted upon if the action could be explained by other sources. Reconnaissance flights, agents' reports, radar sightings, any could justify British responses. Nothing could suggest Britain was reading German communications directly. The Luftwaffe's traffic revealed bombing targets, force compositions, timing, and tactics. During the Battle of Britain, Ultra helped RAF Fighter Command anticipate raids. But every decision was filtered through security protocols. Sometimes RAF commanders received warnings. Sometimes they didn't, if defending too effectively would expose the source. By November 1940, the Blitz had hammered British cities for 2 months. London bombed for 57 consecutive nights. Liverpool, Birmingham, Bristol, Southampton all suffered major raids. Churchill knew every raid was coming. He watched them happen, knowing that overreacting would destroy Britain's greatest advantage. But Bletchley Park was about to hand Churchill intelligence that would test his resolve in ways no previous raid had. November 12, 1940. Bletchley Park decrypted Luftwaffe communications containing a new code word, Korn, German designation for a major operation. Further decrypts revealed the target, radio navigation beams intersecting over Coventry, Britain's 11th largest city and critical centre of aircraft engine production. The Daimler, Alvis, Armstrong Siddeley and Rover factories made Coventry strategically vital. Over 200 factories contributed to war production. The decrypts revealed the scale. Over 500 bombers. Scheduled for November 14th, Dependent on moonlight, what the RAF called a bomber's moon, the Luftwaffe termed it Mondscheinsonate, moonlight sonata. Churchill received the intelligence summary on November 13th. His military secretary, Hastings Ismay, recorded that Churchill read the decrypt 3 times without speaking. The summary detailed target, timing, force composition, and ordnance, high explosives, and incendiaries designed to create firestorms. Churchill understood immediately Coventry could be evacuated, RAF fighter command positioned in overwhelming strength, anti-aircraft batteries reinforced, fire brigades pre-positioned. The defences could be so effective that German losses would be catastrophic, and every German intelligence analyst would ask how the British knew. Churchill called an emergency meeting of his inner war cabinet, only those with ultra-clearance, Clement Attlee, Anthony Eden, and the Chiefs of Staff. The meeting at 10 Downing Street, Air Chief Marshal Charles Portal presented tactical options. Fighter command could position extra squadrons, anti-aircraft guns could be moved from London, fire brigades from surrounding regions pre-positioned. Most critically, civilians could be warned to evacuate before the raid. Any single response was explicable through other sources, but evacuating Coventry meant telling tens of thousands that a major raid was imminent hours beforehand. That foreknowledge had no plausible explanation except broken German codes. Churchill asked the question everyone understood, but no one wanted to voice. What was Coventry worth compared to Ultra? The answers were calculated and cold. Coventry's factories could be rebuilt, workers dispersed, production relocated. The city would eventually recover. Ultra's value was incalculable. Naval intelligence used Enigma to route convoys around U-boat wolf packs. The Battle of the Atlantic, Britain's lifeline, depended on reading German naval codes. RAF Bomber Command used Ultra to target German facilities and minimize losses. Portal estimated Ultra saved hundreds of merchant ships monthly. Air Vice Marshal Sholto Douglas calculated Ultra reduced RAF bomber losses by 20 to 30%. The Admiralty's calculations were starker. Without Ultra, Britain's food supply would fail within 6 months. Churchill listened without interruption. Then he spoke the decision that would haunt him for life. Coventry could not be evacuated. Normal defensive measures could be implemented, those any city on alert might deploy. But nothing more. RAF Fighter Command would be notified a major raid was expected based on reconnaissance and agent reports. Anti-aircraft batteries would be alerted. Coventry's civil defence warned of possible action, but not the specific target, timing, or overwhelming scale. Churchill's instruction was explicit. The source must be protected at all costs. November 14th, 1940 morning. Coventry woke to a cold, clear autumn day. The city had been bombed 17 times since August, but never on the scale Churchill's intelligence predicted. Most residents went to work. The war economy demanded constant production. Air raid precaution wardens conducted usual inspections, shelters checked, fire-watching rosters reviewed. Coventry's ARP included 4,000 volunteers, 297 full-time firefighters, and 800 auxiliaries, but they prepared for an ordinary raid, 50 to 80 bombers, 2 to 3 hours. Nothing suggested what was actually coming. At Bletchley Park, codebreakers monitored German communications. By midday, they confirmed the raid was proceeding. Weather over France was clear. The bomber moon would provide perfect visibility. At RAF Fighter Command, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding reviewed evening dispositions. He'd been told to expect a major raid somewhere in the Midlands. Without specific target information, he could only deploy standard patrols. Night fighter technology in 1940 was primitive, Bristol bow fighters with barely functional early AI radar. Churchill spent the afternoon in the cabinet war rooms. He met with American Ambassador John Wynant about Lend-Lease. He reviewed Mediterranean strategy. He worked through red boxes of paperwork, and he waited for nightfall, knowing what was coming, powerless to stop it without destroying Ultra. His private secretary, John Colville, later wrote, Churchill was more silent than usual that afternoon. He declined lunch. He snapped at interruptions. Those who knew him recognized the signs. Churchill wrestling with a decision already made but not yet at peace with. At 14 hour, Bletchley Park updated Luftwaffe crews briefed. Raid begins at dusk. At 17 hours, final confirmation. Bombers being armed and fueled. 0 hour set for 19 Haut. Churchill made no new orders. The decision stood November 14, 1940 evening. As darkness fell, Coventry civilians went about evening routines. Factories ran extended shifts. Families ate dinners. Children put to bed. ARP wardens began night patrols. The city had lived under bombing threat for months. This night seemed no different. At 1817, British radar detected first formations crossing the Channel. At 1845, Observer Corps reported bomber streams heading northwest. At 19, air raid sirens sounded across Coventry. The population had 11 minutes. Civilians grabbed children and ran for shelters, basements, cellars, the medieval cathedral crypt, public shelters in parks. Families with Anderson shelters crowded into spaces designed for 4, often holding 7 or 8. At 1911, Pathfinder aircraft arrived. Heinkel He 111s carrying incendiaries and target-marking flares. They ignited the medieval city centre, creating a blazing aiming point visible for miles. At 1920, when the main bomber stream arrived, 449 Luftwaffe bombers began dropping payloads. Each carried high-explosive bombs and incendiaries. The strategy was deliberate: high explosives to shatter buildings and rupture water mains, incendiaries to ignite rubble and overwhelm fire brigades. The raid lasted 11 hours. The night of November 14th and 15th, RAF Fighter Command achieved 7 confirmed kills, less than 2% of the attacking force. Anti-aircraft guns fired continuously until barrels overheated. They claimed 12 bombers, though post-war analysis suggested closer to 4. Coventry's fire brigades fought a losing battle from the first hour. Incendiaries started thousands of fires. High explosives ruptured water mains, leaving crews without pressure. Auxiliary firefighters from Birmingham, Leicester and Solihull arrived, but the firestorm overwhelmed every resource. The medieval city centre was destroyed completely. St. Michael's Cathedral gutted, its roof consumed, walls left as skeletal frames that would become the war's most iconic ruin. 17 churches destroyed or damaged. The council house hit, the Hippodrome Theatre collapsed. But the bombers' primary target, Coventry's industrial capacity, proved resilient. The Daimler factory hit, but production resumed within days. Armstrong Siddeley's plant suffered damage, but critical machinery was protected. German intelligence assumed concentrated bombing would cripple production for months. It didn't. The human cost was devastating. When dawn broke, 568 civilians were dead, another 863 seriously injured, over 4,300 homes destroyed, 15,000 more damaged, thousands homeless. Churchill received casualty reports at 8:30 on November 15th. He read them in silence, then he ordered an immediate visit to Coventry, November 16th, 1940. Churchill arrived in Coventry 2 days after the raid. His motorcade drove through streets still smouldering, past buildings reduced to rubble. Rescue workers were still digging bodies from collapsed shelters. The smell of smoke and death hung over the city. Churchill inspected the cathedral ruins. He walked through destroyed streets. He met the mayor, ARP wardens, exhausted firefighters. He stood in the shell of Broadgate and addressed survivors. His speech was brief and emotional. He praised Coventry's courage. He promised rebuilding. He told civilians they had endured the worst the enemy could deliver, and they had not broken. What he did not tell them was that he had known. that he could have warned them, that he had chosen not to. His private secretary recorded Churchill wept in his car driving back to London. He told Hastings Ismay, "They died so that we might continue to read the enemy's mind." German intelligence assessed the raid as complete success. The Luftwaffe's report claimed Coventry's war-making capacity destroyed. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels coined a new verb, Coventrieren, to coventrate, meaning utterly destroy a city by aerial bombardment. Critically, German intelligence saw no evidence of British foreknowledge. Defensive measures had been normal, consistent with radar detection and general alert. Fighter Command's response standard. Anti-aircraft fire typical. No indication of advance warning. The Enigma machines remained trusted. German communications continued using same encryption protocols. Ultra survived. Over following months, Ultra proved its worth beyond Churchill's November calculations. In the Battle of the Atlantic, Bletchley Park's naval section broke the Kriegsmarine's Enigma and began reading U-boat operational orders. Convoy routes adjusted to avoid Wolfpack concentrations. By mid-1941, Atlantic shipping losses declined. By 1943, the U-boat threat was systematically defeated. In North Africa, Ultra gave Montgomery precise information about Rommel's supply situation, force dispositions, operational plans. Montgomery's El Alamein victory in October 1942, Britain's first major ground victory, was built on Ultra's foundation. In the Mediterranean, Ultra revealed Italian naval movements, enabling Taranto and Cape Matapan victories. During D-Day, Ultra provided detailed German order of battle, revealing defensive preparations and counterattack plans. Eisenhower later credited Ultra with shortening the war by at least a year. Every Ultra decrypt was built on Churchill's November 14th decision. Every ship saved, every battle won with foreknowledge, every Allied soldier who survived because commanders knew German plans, all depended on Enigma remaining trusted. And Coventry burned so that secret would survive. Coventry's destruction was explained to the British public as German barbarism, indiscriminate terror bombing aimed at civilian morale. Churchill's speeches framed Coventry as martyrdom, sacrifice, endurance. The truth about Ultra remained classified until 1974, 34 years after the raid. When Group Captain Frederick Winterbotham's book, The Ultra Secret, revealed it, historians began reassessing wartime decisions through signals intelligence. The debate about Churchill's Coventry decision began then and has never been resolved. Some historians argue Churchill made the only militarily rational choice. Ultra's strategic value vastly exceeded Coventry's tactical importance. The intelligence saved far more British lives than were lost. No evacuation could have been implemented without exposing the secret. Others question whether the choice was truly binary. Could partial evacuation have been explained through other sources? Could fighter command have been positioned more aggressively? Could more fire brigades have been pre-positioned based on general intelligence? Churchill never publicly addressed the decision in detail. His wartime memoirs mentioned Coventry's destruction, but made no reference to advanced knowledge or Ultra. He described the raid as a tragedy he learned about after the fact. Privately, Churchill admitted the moral weight never left him. Hastings Ismay wrote, "Churchill considered Coventry one of the hardest decisions of the war, harder than ordering the destruction of the French fleet at Mers el-Kebir, which killed 1,297 French sailors. That was brutal but straightforward. Coventry was different. It required sacrificing his own civilians while possessing the power to save them. Ultra remained Britain's most guarded secret throughout the war. The security protocols Churchill established in November 1940 remained until VE Day. Every decrypt was handled with obsessive security. Source protection overrode every consideration. Bletchley Park's workforce expanded from 200 in 1940 to over 9,000 by 1945. The majority never knew what they worked on. Codebreakers who decrypted messages didn't know how intelligence was used. Analysts who summarized decrypts didn't know who received them. Commanders who acted on Ultra rarely knew its source. Not a single person betrayed the secret during the war. No German intelligence service discovered the Enigma break. Post-war interrogations revealed complete German confidence in Enigma's security until Allied investigators told them the truth. Coventry's sacrifice ensured that confidence remained. German faith in Enigma survived because British responses never revealed foreknowledge. Cities burned, ships sank, soldiers died in battles that could have been prevented, all to maintain the appearance Britain was fighting blind. Churchill's November 14th decision established the principle: Ultra must be protected regardless of cost. That principle governed British intelligence for the rest of the war. The city began reconstruction before the war ended. Basil Spence's modernist plan replaced the destroyed medieval centre with wide streets and contemporary architecture. St. Michael's Cathedral ruins were left as memorial. A new cathedral was built alongside, consecrated in 1962. Coventry's industrial capacity recovered faster than German intelligence predicted. Within weeks, most factories resumed production. Machine tools were protected or rapidly repaired. By January 1941, output nearly returned to pre-raid levels. The raid supposed to cripple Coventry's war-making capacity ultimately failed in its primary objective. But it succeeded in a way the Luftwaffe never intended. It validated Churchill's decision. Coventry survived as industrial centre. Ultra survived as intelligence source. Britain gained the advantage that helped win the war. But 568 civilians never knew they died for that advantage. Modern historians acknowledge the decision's brutal logic while debating its moral weight. Professor Harry Hinsley, who worked at Bletchley Park, later wrote, "Churchill was faced with a decision no democratic leader should ever have to make, choosing between protecting his people and protecting the weapon that might save them all. The mathematical calculation was clear: 568 lives versus potentially millions saved by ultra-intelligence. But the moral calculation has never been clear. Did Churchill have the right to make that choice? Could he have found alternatives? Was the sacrifice truly necessary? The questions remain unanswered. What is known is that ultra-intelligence shortened the war, saved countless lives, and gave the Allies strategic advantage that conventional intelligence could never have provided. And it survived because Churchill chose to let Coventry burn rather than expose the secret that might win the war. Intelligence warfare requires ruthless calculation. Churchill made a calculation that valued secret knowledge above immediate lives. Churchill was given an impossible choice. He had the power to save a city, but only by destroying Britain's greatest weapon. He chose the weapon. He sacrificed the city. The bombers came as predicted. 568 British civilians died on November 14, 1940. Ultra survived. The Enigma secret remained intact. And for the next 4.5 years, British commanders read German minds, routed convoys around U-boats, positioned armies against known German deployments, and won battles that foreknowledge made winnable. Coventry didn't fall to overwhelming German power. It fell to Churchill's choice. A decision made in full knowledge of consequences, with the weight of all those lives measured against cold mathematics of strategic advantage. By choosing to protect Ultra over Coventry, Churchill proved wartime leadership sometimes requires sacrificing the innocent to protect the many. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park won battles without firing a shot. Coventry burned so their secret would survive. Was it the right decision? History records Ultra shortened the war. Historians estimate Ultra saved hundreds of thousands of Allied lives. The strategic advantage was incalculable. Against that, 568 civilians died in one night in one city when their Prime Minister possessed knowledge to save them. Churchill carried that weight until his death. Coventry's civilians never knew their sacrifice had purpose. For 34 years after the war, Britain kept the secret that made their deaths strategically rational. The lesson transcends World War II. In total war, leaders face choices where every option demands sacrifice. Churchill chose the sacrifice that gave Britain the weapon to survive. History judges whether the cost was worth the victory. What would you have chosen